I'm bored. Let's watch Nerdrotic. All right, before we get into this video, I just want to apologize. If you hear some background noise, it's like 100 degrees here. It's really hot. So I've got a little fan running. You might have heard it in some other videos. That's what it is. I do apologize. It is just too hot in this space right now for me to turn it off. So there it is. The title of this video is Superman is Not Woke and a Total Disappointment. So I am curious with this video, how they tiptoe around their normal criticisms. That's kind of what I'm looking for. I want to see how they tiptoe around their normal criticisms with movies and still make Superman sound like a disappointment. So let's jump into this video and see what he has to say.
Nerdrotic.com.
Friends, it's been a wild and crazy summer so far. We've had everything from dollar store civil war, followed by Temu World War III, Diddy is free, a mysterious client list is missing, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, and none of the online discourse surrounding these topics holds a candle to Superman. And you can almost understand, considering all of the hubris, ignorance, incompetence, and unforced errors that have led to the third reboot of The Man of Steel in 20 years from America's dumbest...
Wait, hold on. Did he say that? Yeah, he says Superman Returns is a reboot. So I just had to double check. Yeah, the Superman Returns movie was not a reboot. It was a continuation after Superman 2. It takes place 5 years after Superman 2. Bryan Singer, Brandon Routh, and it's supposed to be a continuation of that like Donner Reeve Superman era. So it wasn't a reboot. It was just a continuation with a different director and different cast. But the story continued from the first two Superman movies. So that wasn't a reboot. So already misinformation, already lying out of the gate. It's crazy. Let's continue.
Steel in 20 years from America's dumbest company, Warner Brothers. After David Zaslav mercilessly and justifiably cleansed himself of all the executives responsible for the Snyder fiasco, he brought in the very humble James Gunn, who admittedly inherited the total dumpster fire that was the DCEU. Now, it certainly didn't help that James Gunn's first public act as head of DC was to fire Henry Cavill right after The Rock talked.
Fire Henry Cavill. That's interesting. Henry Cavill was never officially signed back on for another Superman movie. So he wasn't fired. He made a cameo in Black Adam, and he publicly announced his return. But that was before James Gunn and Peter Safran were installed, if I remember correctly. And I think James Gunn said, matter of fact, let me look this up. Yeah, James Gunn says, we didn't fire Henry. Henry was never cast. For me, it was about who I want to cast as Superman and who does the story best serve. I like Henry. He's a great guy. Yeah, there was no contract. Henry wasn't like signed on for anything. So whatever promises were made to him behind the scenes were not legal. He wasn't legally signed back on as Superman. 2 minutes in to a video. Matter of fact, the first minute and a half was like clips. We skipped over that. So we're not even really 2 minutes in and already just like misinformation and lies.
Henry into being in Black Adam, a decision the Warner executives and James Gunn were certainly aware of. The fans were not happy, but I think it...
Certainly aware of. There was no contract signed. So it doesn't matter if they were aware of it or not. There was no pen on paper. And I've been working in the gig industry for a very long time. If there's no contract, you are not officially hired to do anything. That's the reality of it.
At least they could understand if James Gunn wanted to start with a clean slate, which turned out not to be the case. James Gunn and company announced they were not only doing a Superman movie, they were creating an all-new DC universe, announcing multiple projects, some of which have already been canceled. And it turns out they would feature some holdovers, like John Cena as Peacemaker, Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, a recast Nathan Fillion, a recast Sean Gunn, a recast Jason Momoa as Lobo, which is...
The only person that we know right now that is officially been shown to be a part of that older universe is Peacemaker. And we don't know how that story is going to play out because we haven't had the second season of Peacemaker yet. A lot of the other projects with other actors attached to them aren't even in production yet. And any of the recasts that were done don't count as the same characters. He's really trying to set up the Superman movie. He's really trying to set it up.
Great. And of course, we can't forget James Gunn's wife. And if that wasn't bad enough, there was the movies they had already released and the movies they had yet to release. After their last hits, Aquaman and Shazam to a lesser extent, they released Birds of Prey, which flopped. Wonder Woman 84, flopped. The Suicide Squad, directed by James Gunn, flopped.
All right, so there's a little bit of nuance here that he's missing. There are some of these films that absolutely did not do well at the box office for different reasons. But Wonder Woman 84 and The Suicide Squad are two movies, and I got my notes here. They're two movies that were affected by other factors besides not being good movies, I guess. Let's start out with Wonder Woman 1984, or Wonder Woman 84. So this movie came out on December 25th of 2020, during like the height of COVID. So theaters were closed or operating at reduced capacity. There were places where theaters just were not open at all. And people worried about getting sick and going out and seeing movies with people. So they did that simultaneous HBO Max release thing where Wonder Woman 84 came out day and date, same day, which allowed it to be pirated like crazy. So we don't know what the real numbers would have been for Wonder Woman 84. We have no clue. There's no way. Suicide Squad, which was 2021, August 6, 2021, came out around the time the Delta variant was out. So people were, again, worried and upset. It was also a day and date release, just like Wonder Woman 1984. And there was also confusion with the original Suicide Squad. Casual viewers didn't understand what this movie was. And it was rated R. So there was a lot of things about that movie that affected its release. So those two films, we can't really look at those and go, these are actual, they're judged on quality. Because a lot of people would argue that The Suicide Squad is like one of their top comic book movies. So, I mean, you're using it because it's part of your narrative. But these two movies, I think we don't know for sure what they would have been, numbers-wise.
Black Adam flopped. Shazam 2 flopped. The Flash, James Gunn's favorite superhero movie.
Yeah, the movies that came out after they announced that they were ending this universe and starting a new one didn't perform well. Shocker. Shocker that people didn't want to get invested in movies that were not connected to that universe. And Ezra Miller being attached to a movie was a big problem too. We know this. Anyway, let's continue.
Movie flopped. Blue Beetle flopped. Aquaman 2 flopped. Joker 2 flopped. And the only hit amongst all of them was The Batman, a movie that has nothing to do with James Gunn's DCU, but at least Matt Reeves.
Well, neither did the Joker. The Joker, the second Joker, the Joker and Joker 2 had nothing to do with that either. So, I mean, are you saying it's because this movie did well because it wasn't connected to anything previously or anything upcoming? Because that's the same way the Joker was.
He's just handed in the script a couple of days ago, and maybe it will be finished sometime before Robert Pattinson dies of old age. Now, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here by saying the DCU and Superman hasn't really gotten off to the strongest of starts, and it's had its problems. So despite what James Gunn says about James Gunn's DCU, Superman needs to not only be a...
So, I mean, it had a really strong opening weekend. I know you keep trying to like say, oh, adjusted for inflation, all that. Maybe you'll even talk about it in this video, but we'll dive into that. That's argument doesn't hold up. It is not the correct argument to make to judge the financial quality of a current film. And we'll go over that when we get to it.
It needs to be a walk-off home run. And as far as the marketing for this film is concerned, which is really important on a scale from Rachel Zegler to 10, I'd give it a 6. If you take James Gunn out of the equation, I'd give it an 8. But at least as far as insufferable political...
So marketing, this is another thing. Marketing only really matters for the opening weekend. The marketing that the studios pay for primarily affect the opening weekend. It has very little to do with like the weekends following that opening weekend. The reason why is they need to get people to go into theaters and see it. And then the rest of it is kind of like word of mouth or stragglers that didn't see it on opening weekend that are just kind of like going in when they can. So that the marketing is pretty much for the opening weekend of a movie. And again, you're going to try and frame it that this movie didn't do well for whatever reason. I have a sinking suspicion you are. Even though it hit its target goal for their domestic box office. And I think it went above the target goal. I'll have to double check, but I think it actually went above the target goal for domestic box office. So the marketing was successful for them. And the marketing, again, has nothing to do with the quality of the movie. And here we are 4 minutes into your video, and you've yet to talk about the movie. So basically what you're doing here is you're establishing a narrative for the people that are watching your video. You're kind of like edging them, getting them ready for the big release. That's what you're doing. You're doing this because you know that whatever you have to say about the movie is so thin that you have to set up and establish a narrative before you even get to that. That's what you're doing.
Hollywood was concerned, they pretty much stayed out of it until now. Thanks to Variety's Mark Milken, the bane of the adult pretender and friend of YouTubers everywhere.
So yeah, so now you're blaming them for a reporter asking questions. Again, this isn't them. This is a reporter that decided to ask them things.
James has said that Superman is an immigrant story, that it is political. MAGA today was getting a little upset that he called Superman an immigrant. I wanted to get your reaction.
Somebody needs a hug. It's just a movie, guys. It's just a movie.
It is exactly what the movie is about, I think, that like we support.
Okay, I also want to point something out. This is very common for Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker, all of these guys. They're playing funny music in the background to change the way you feel about what you're watching. It's an old Hollywood trick. It's an old trick. Basically, they are creating the environment for you to feel like you should be laughing at this or making fun of it by putting music behind it. It's such a subtle, simple thing they do, but they do it a lot. There's other tricks they use, but this is one they use quite often. Nerdrotic is very, very, very familiar with doing this.
Our people, you know, we love our immigrants. Yes, Superman is an immigrant. And yes, the people that we support in this country are immigrants. And if you don't like that, then you're not American.
That was certainly the last thing James Gunn and the Warner Brothers executives needed, but not to worry. The Warner Brothers handpicked social media influencers who were offered a free screening and free drinks are here to the rescue with a diverse set of unique and authentic reactions.
Hashtag Superman.
Okay, so before we get into this, I've already debunked this too. It is illegal for any of these people that he's about to show on screen. It is illegal for them to lie about the way they feel about a movie. If they are getting any sort of money or special treatment or gifts or anything, and the studio says to them, we want you to only say positive things about this, then it becomes an ad. It is not a review. Warner Brothers has already been through this back in 2016 with PewDiePie and Shadows of Mordor. They got in trouble for PewDiePie being paid to review the game that was seen as an ad because he was given money in exchange for a positive review of the game. Since then, they have been scrutinized by the FTC. They've been watched by the FTC. They do not have the money or the means to do this without getting in trouble. So what he's doing is he's accusing not only Warner Brothers of doing something illegal, but the people in the images he's showing. He's going to be accusing them of doing something illegal, which is making statements that are ads and not reviews. He is accusing them of violating the FTC guidelines. I need you to understand that. This is what he's doing. He is saying that these guys are doing something they're not supposed to be doing. It's disgusting, actually. And there's more to it. Let's watch a little bit of this segment, and then I'm going to dive into the extra part of this here.
Is a triumph for the new DC universe. It's a comic book movie brought to beautiful live-action life, brimming with hope and fulfillment. It actually elicited tears of joy from me. Hashtag Superman is a triumph for the new DC universe. It's a comic book movie brought to beautiful live-action life. Hashtag Superman is the perfect comic book movie. It felt like I was at my local comic shop reading a Superman book as the characters leapt off the pages. And movie scoops. It's a comic book brought to beautiful live-action.
Okay, so what he's doing in the background, you hear the little like whistle click noise. You hear that? It's like, kind of like every time he switches one. There are tricks that people do with tone manipulation when it comes to like media and stuff like that, where it gives you like a tonal dissonance. You're watching something being read to you in like a Mickey Mouse voice, and that tricks you into thinking it's supposed to be stupid and silly, even though there's really nothing stupid or silly being said on screen. This is another trick that he does. It's another trick that that Nerdrotic does, that a lot of these channels do, to elicit an emotion from the people watching their content. Okay? These are like softball tricks. And he's been doing it for a long time now. I need you guys to understand, when he does this, he is manipulating you. This is a manipulation tactic. Playing certain kinds of music, saying things in a certain kind of voice. It is a manipulation tactic to get you to feel some way about something that you may not feel otherwise.
Life brimming with hope and fulfillment. It actually elicited tears of joy from me. Hashtag Superman is fun, heartfelt, and feels like a comic book come to life. Hashtag Superman is a thoroughly entertaining reboot, yielding many sequences that feel like they were ripped straight from a Golden Age comic book. Hashtag Superman left me with a giant happy dumb grin. David Cornsweet embodies Superman.
Again, he's accusing all of these people of being paid to make positive comments about this movie. That's crazy that he's doing that. All of these people he's showing on screen right now, you guys are being accused by Nerdrotic of taking pay for an ad that you are not disclosing. You do realize that these people could lose careers because of that. Something as simple as that, they could lose their career because of it. But you don't care. You don't care about that.
Such a perfect way. This is an actual comic book movie come to life. Hashtag Superman is a triumph. David Cornsweet steals the show. Well, I would hope so. A cinematic triumph. James Gunn's Hashtag Superman is his magnum opus, rating 10 out of 10 from the completely objective Everything DCU.
So after all of the hype and the genuine reactions from the handpicked Warner Brothers influencers,
he did it again. Handpicked Warner Brother influencers. He is insinuating that the people that we just saw those statements from are illegally taking money and making an ad in the form of a review. I just need you guys to understand that.
Light discourse between the Snyder fans and the Gunn fans and the general James Gunness of it all. How was the movie? Well, it turns out James Gunn's Superman is Superman's James Gunn, and not in a good way, and I'm a fan of the guy's work. Concerns work, and a guy well known for successfully taking misfit characters from the comic books and bringing them to life, including a talking raccoon. Do this with a traditional superhero.
You just, hold on. You're showing Suicide Squad, talking positively about the work he's done, but then earlier you included this in your list of flops because of the narrative you were painting. So, do you not like it? I'm very confused by this.
Guy known for ensemble pieces have a singular focus on that traditional superhero? Can a guy known for irreverent humor that led to the creation of the now trademark Marvel humor dial it down and make something fun yet earnest like Iron Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and yes, Donner's Superman? After watching James Gunn's Superman, those concerns were justified. Because, and you can call me crazy for thinking this, I think a Superman movie should focus on Superman, which it didn't, and feature a man that is super, who wasn't. Now don't get me wrong, David Cornsweet seems like a good guy, and I think he looks like Superman and at times acts like Superman and might embody the character once somebody gives him a good script. Doesn't that?
So you're insinuating that the movie wasn't, I guess, what you expected? They've never hid the fact that there was a bunch of characters in this movie. Like, this is something that we've known from the beginning. So what it is you were expecting something that was never being sold to you. Yeah, the title of the movie is Superman. But you know full well going into the movie it wasn't going to be just Superman. The marketing, all of the stuff that came out about this movie told you that it was going to be a movie full of characters. So this is one of the things I find to be a big problem, is you are judging the movie based on what you thought the movie was going to be and ignoring everything the movie was. So every bit of the marketing and stuff that you completely missed, there was tons of it, told us that this movie was not going to be singularly about Superman. We already knew this. I don't understand what this criticism is. I mean, yeah, the movie had a lot of characters. You could argue that some of them could have been streamlined a little bit, but they never advertised it as a movie that wasn't going to have a lot of characters. That was already something we were aware of.
That sound familiar, am I right, Henry and Brandon? Many of the concerns with the clips and trailers released over the last couple of months, and by the way, if you've seen them all, you've seen the first half of the movie, were...
So you... You talked about the lackluster marketing, but now you're just talking about they've been advertising the movie for 2 months. Okay.
Superman gets his ass kicked too much, but maybe they required a little more context, and after seeing it with context, Superman gets his ass kicked too much. But that's not the only problem, and you're going to hear this from a lot of people, including the ones who like it. Tonally, it's an absolute mess. Superman's James Gunn is a direct response and a polar opposite of the Snyderverse. The problem is, it's a complete overcorrection, and it doesn't really know what it wants to be. But the good news is, it's not the worst superhero film this year, and it might end up being the best, which admittedly isn't saying very much. The better news is, it isn't woke. Unfortunately, that isn't enough. But the criticisms or praise of this film will...
So you guys, like, your main complaint is that movies are bad because they're woke. So you get a movie that's just a movie about superheroes doing superhero stuff, and because you have a narrative to fill, and by the way, this is a narrative, because you can look online and see that there are lots of people, even on their side of the aisle, that like this movie and have defended this movie, right? So this is definitely a narrative. So he has chosen to try and bring the movie down with other factors, things that were obvious in the marketing of the film. So he's tried to do this because he needs to do this. He needs for this movie to not be good because he needs another hit this year. Nerdrotic needs another thing he can milk for like several months. After Fantastic Four, I made a video about this yesterday. After Fantastic Four, there's not a lot left for them. They're going to have several months of nothing.
Be based solely on the work, which was a lot like what we did when we argued in the comic shop, and I appreciate that. I've heard everybody's pal Tyrone Magnus compare it to Thor: Love and Thunder, which I don't think is an inaccurate description, but I think
it's absolutely inaccurate. It is nowhere near the cringe levels of Thor: Love and Thunder. Nowhere near the cringe levels of that. I mean, we're talking like absolutely, like 100% false. And the fact you're using Tyrone Magnus as someone you're quoting, that's fucking crazy. That's crazy.
Better one would be tonally. It's a lot closer to Black Adam and all the previous DCEU films. And man, I really wanted to like this movie because
it's not anything like the DCEU movies. Did he not just say that this is a stark contrast to like the Snyder stuff? Didn't he just say that? So how is the movie a stark contrast, but then also just like the DCEU movies? Maybe he didn't say that. I'm pretty sure he said that.
I love the idea of moving away from the deconstructed superhero and nihilism and postmodernism and building back up the hero and the bright colors and leaning into the Silver and Bronze Age comics of it all. I'm for all of that and doing something that Marvel has completely moved away from, embracing the spirit of your source material. But you still have to tell a good story, something those Bronze and Silver Age comics, which get a bad rap, did better than most of modern Hollywood. And it's
no. No. Have you ever gone back? Look, I'm going to be honest. Like, you go back and you read something like the original X-Men, like the OG, like I'm not talking about the rebooted, like, you know, 70s X-Men. I'm talking about like the OG X-Men, or even some of the older, like, Fantastic Four stuff, Spider-Man stuff or whatever. There's a lot of bad stories there. There's a lot. I love those characters. I think there's a lot of nostalgia there, but we're not talking about like amazing writing. It's just not. That is a false narrative. That is absolutely fake. That is not real. You're trying to compare that to like cinema? Like, writing in comic books wasn't really truly taken seriously until after Chris Claremont started writing the X-Men. And then that changed the way comic books were written for decades.
something we really didn't get with Superman's James Gunn. It was more like a series of things that happened. And this makes me think of a great video out there from Trey Parker and Matt Stone explaining the basics of storytelling.
We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're f***ed. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word "therefore" or "but." Okay, this happens, right? And then this happens. No, it should be this happens, and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens.
No. I don't know what any of it means. Like, I have no clue what it means. I have no clue what any of that stuff ever meant.
That's right. James Gunn has decided to take that advice and do the opposite. As a matter of fact, I'll just break down the plot.
I'm sorry. Why would James Gunn take advice from them? But James Gunn is an acclaimed director. Like, he's got stuff under the, he's got a lot of things under his belt. Why would he? What the fuck, man? Like, what are you even talking about?
As it goes in the movie. After an event that happens off screen where Superman stops an invasion from totally not Russia into totally not brown Ukraine or totally not Israel into totally not Palestine. I didn't see it that way. But if some people see Israel.
So you say it's not woke, but you're including things that you would that you would consider woke. You said it wasn't. But now you're dropping little hints in there. Let's go through that again, because this is something like, if there was some sort of social message about like different countries and things going on politically and socially between countries, he would consider that to be a woke injection into a movie. We've already established this. So now he is throwing this in there, even though he said it's not woke. Let's listen again.
Happens off screen where Superman stops an invasion from totally not Russia into totally not brown Ukraine or totally not Israel into totally not Palestine. I didn't see it that way. But if some people see Israel portrayed this way, well, maybe some people working on this film are forgetting who signs their checks and who their agents are.
So he did see it that way. That's a wink wink from him. He did see it that way. That's what he's saying. So the idea of it not being woke, he's saying that because he understands the writings on the wall and people are not vibing with that, with this movie, but he's talking about stuff that he would call woke in other films, in case you're not paying attention.
And then Krypto saves Superman so the Superman robots can save Superman. And then Superman goes back to Metropolis to get his ass beat by the Hammer of Baravia. And then Lex Luthor, who despises Superman for making humans like him feel insignificant, invades the Fortress of Solitude and steals a message from Jor-El, Lara, and Krypto. And then Lex Luthor and the Engineer decrypt the message from Jor-El and Lara and find out that Superman was sent there to conquer and have many wives to spread the seed of Krypton.
Nice.
That's a nice little narrative you painted. It's a nice little narrative you painted. I mean, I could go through and do the same thing. So you're playing the and then game. Let's play the but and therefore game using the same scenario that you talked about. This is a new Superman, so they show him getting beat at the start by an unknown character. But he gets saved by Krypto, who they're establishing as loyal but unreliable. Therefore, his robots have to be the ones to help him because they're also being established as robots who care for him even without real emotion, so we feel a connection to them. But they aren't capable of stopping Lex from getting into the fortress. Therefore, Superman has to use what's at his disposal to confront Lex and his minions. You see how easy it is to paint a narrative? This is what these guys do professionally. This is what they do professionally. They create narratives for you guys. Okay, you'll notice I skipped a bunch of the video. He spent like 2-3 minutes basically talking about the entire story of the movie using "and then." It's really fucking sad. Again, it's fucking sad and pathetic, man. Like, we're 12 minutes into your 21-minute video, and you've tried to make the movie sound bad by using some sort of formula that has nothing to do with anything. It's literally has nothing to do with anything. This is so fucking obviously a narrative. Let's continue.
Now, I might have left out an "and then" here or there, but you get the picture. And if you think there's any more depth to the storytelling than what I just read off to you, there isn't. Now, if it seems like I'm being a little hard on this film, I am, because I expect more from a Superman movie from James Gunn. It's not the worst I've seen this year. That still belongs to Emilia Perez. And quite frankly, these are the most difficult movies to review. It's much easier to review something that's really good or really bad. But this one is spectacularly mid and overwhelmingly whelming. Now, there were concerns that...
Mid, but you said it's a total disappointment. That sounds worse than mid. Mid is just good, right? I would consider mid to just be somewhat average, leaning into good. Like, total disappointment sounds like 0 out of 10. But this is what you got to do, man. Like, this is the thing that gets me, you guys, is when you have these channels that live and die on get woke, go broke, and you have a movie come out that doesn't totally fit their woke criteria, but they know that their audience isn't going to give them a pass if they don't shit on it. If they don't take it, demolish it, and shit on it because it's a mainstream movie by Marvel or DC, and it's a movie that's connected to a director that used to work for Marvel. So it's predictably part of the course. I would be more shocked, honestly, if Nerdrotic were just honest about the movie. I would be more shocked about that. Like when I talked about Yellow Flash and these other guys, I would be more shocked if he was honest about it. But he can't be. He's in a really tough position because he has so many subscribers. So many people are working for him behind the scenes. He can't afford to not go hard on this stuff. He has to do it. And unlike Critical Drinker, he has to actually put in a little more effort. That's why this video is 21 minutes. He has to put in a little more effort. You still have not established to me why the movie is so bad. We are 13 minutes into this video. 3 minutes of that was you just recapping the movie. The first minute and a half of it was clips from interviews. The first 7 or 8 minutes of the video was you just basically glazing everything from the interviews that were made to the people that saw the movie and left reviews and stuff like that. You have yet to explain to me what it is you actually don't like about this movie. Give me some concrete reason why. Using some fucked up formula and trying to apply that to this movie specifically, even though I don't think you've ever done this before in any of the reviews I've ever seen, trying to use this fucked up formula specifically for this is crazy. It's fucking crazy.
Superman featured too many characters, and it featured too many characters. But I'll give it to James Gunn for consistency because they had the same complexity and depth as the plot. I thought Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner was pretty good, along with...
Okay, too many characters. That's the first... it's the second time you've mentioned about the film having too many people in it. You talked about it a little while ago, but you didn't really go into detail. I will say this. We knew it was going to have a lot of characters in it. We already knew that. So that's something you could have said prior to the movie coming out. But explain why. Did you want to see more from these characters? That's the thing. If you feel like the characters didn't have a lot to do, then there's only 2 things you could say about that. One, you don't find them to be interesting and you think they weren't important to the plot, or you wanted to see more from them and he didn't give you enough of it. Because just saying there's too many characters without saying why that's a problem doesn't really tell us what your issue with it is. There's movies that have lots of characters. They're extremely successful. You gave James Gunn credit for that early in this video. You said he's been able to balance movies with an ensemble cast. So what is it about this movie specifically having too many characters? What is your issue with it in the context of this movie? You've talked for 13 minutes. Give us something, man.
Superman featured too many characters, and it featured too many characters. But I'll give it to James Gunn for consistency because they had the same complexity and depth as the plot. I thought Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner was pretty good, along with Anthony Carrigan's Metamorpho, and I thought Mr. Terrific was really good. No.
Okay, those are 3 of the main characters in the movie other than Superman. a lot of the other characters didn't really, they were just background characters. So you mentioned like 3 of the, okay, let's continue.
I'm not going to say terrific. I'd like to see more of the Justice Gang in a different movie, and I'm not the only one to point this out, but tonally, they come off just like the Justice Society in Black Adam. Again, proving why mid-movies are the hardest to review of the rest of the additional cast. The best I could say is they're fine, I guess. The only characters I didn't like were Hot Girl and the Engineer, obviously, because they're women.
Remember, they're just jokes.
So I don't care too much about that. Anyway, you just said there was too many characters, but you're praising the characters in the movie with the exception of 2. Hawk Girl, we could have a conversation about that. I think Hawk Girl probably was underutilized in the film. I thought the Engineer was fine. But you didn't say there was anything wrong with those characters. Matter of fact, you said you wanted to see more of them. So I'm trying to understand, like, why you think this movie is mid. What is the reason why?
We're all going to die soon, and there's no sequel.
And hey, Jimmy Olsen is white again, and his unassuming Babe Magnet character was kind of funny. And Ma and Pa Kent were barely in it, and yes, they were portrayed as a stereotypical country bumpkin couple, but there was one funny scene that played out just like a phone call with my mom, who has never seen a second of my YouTube and thinks I'm on a radio show. But the most significant and only moment between Clark and Jonathan you've already seen online. Oh yeah, Crypto. A lot of people are going to like him. I think they played the joke a little too long, but I didn't mind it. But the one thing I'm completely tired of is these breed swaps. He's supposed to be a lab. And when it comes to Lex Luthor, Nicholas Hoult is a great actor, and he has some great moments, including one of the best scenes in the movie when he just shoots a guy in the head. And it was at that point I thought they were going to elevate and take the character somewhere, but this can be said about the entire movie and everyone in it. It just reverts back to its total weirdness. Lots of wasted potential in this, including Rachel Brosnahan's Lois Lane, who's really good in...
So what's the weirdness? Like, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? Explain. If I tell you that I have an issue, like, let me put this in perspective for people watching so you understand what I'm talking about. If I have an issue with too many characters, then I would point out what the issue with that is. I would say there are too many characters. All of them were underutilized. They didn't make much of a difference in the movie. There was no point in having them there. They felt like they were secondary to the story. They didn't do as much with them as they could have. I would give some detailed information on why I feel that way. Saying weirdness is a nebulous term. What does weirdness mean? What does that mean to somebody that's watching your video trying to extrapolate what your issue is with the film? I don't understand what that means. Look, I've watched a lot of Nerdrotic videos over the years. I don't know what he means by weirdness here. I have no fucking idea. Does he mean the behavior of the characters? Does he mean how they interact with each other? Does he mean like I don't know. I don't know what he means.
Arguably the most developed character in this movie, but she only has 2 real scenes with Clark. The now infamous interview scene, which now that I've seen it with some context is a little better, and the best moment together between Lois and Clark is undercut by James Gunn humor with a battle going on in the background with the Justice Gang. And this brings us to David Corenswet, who, along with most of the cast in this film, did their best with absolutely nothing. He looks like Superman, he sounds like Superman, and guess what? The costume that I criticize looks pretty good in the movie. Although I still hate the new 52 collar. He and Rachel Brosnahan are the only 2 characters that are given a chance to be earnest at all, but every single time it's undercut by something. And that something is usually Marvel James Gunn humor. Before the film, I heard a lot of lip service about this being...
So your issue with the... Look, I'm trying to break this down because he's not being very straightforward here. He wants to say he likes the movie. That's the impression I'm getting. He wants to say that he likes it. He doesn't have a lot to complain about. His concept of mid here is, I have to dislike the movie for my viewers, but ultimately I enjoyed the film. That's the vibe I'm getting from this. Because he hasn't really said anything too damning about this, other than he doesn't like the James Gunn-esque Marvel humor. That's because he has to talk shit about Marvel. And since this isn't a Marvel movie, he has to find a way to get back to that by using James Gunn's signature humor, which he calls Marvel humor, but it's actually just James Gunn's style of filmmaking. This is consistent with James Gunn. Anyway. Let's continue, because right now I'm totally confused if the only issue you have with it is the humor in the movie and you wanted to see more of these characters. I feel like total disappointment is overselling your position.
a hopeful Superman. Within the film, I heard a lot of lip service saying Superman is popular, but at no time do I feel like there's any reverence or respect for the character from anybody within the film or making it. Oh, they like him, but again, they don't respect him. I'd also like to remind you that Superman gets kicked in the balls by Ultraman, and they end the movie with Supergirl calling Superman a bitch. He gets his ass kicked the entire movie, and he's portrayed as frustrated and angry. The one positive note is at least he never gives up. But instead of Superman getting his moment of triumph, he just gets handed more moments of exasperation. And that's the biggest tragedy of all. While there is plenty of action in this and Superman is doing plenty of stuff, there's not a single moment that will define him or this movie.
So your other issue with the movie is that Superman wasn't perfect throughout the film. That there was some sort of tension with the character. They used kryptonite. They used another Kryptonian, the clone of him, to fight him. But to you, that doesn't make any sense. That something as old as kryptonite being used on Superman doesn't make sense because he gets beat up when he's got kryptonite around him. Or another Kryptonian, like a clone of him, is able to fight him and beat him up. As they show in the movie, the reason why is because Lex is so smart that Lex is telling Ultraman what to do to beat Superman. It's a very important situation that requires that context to show that Lex Luthor's brains can win over brawn. That's the point. Otherwise, Superman would have been fighting another capable character as strong as him, and then you could probably argue that how is Superman the best superhero, the best metahuman, if he's getting beat up by another metahuman who just happens to be better than him? But the movie establishes that the only reason Superman gets beat by Ultraman is Ultraman has the same power levels as Superman, but he's got Lex Luthor's intelligence, therefore establishing the actual threat of Lex Luthor in the film. That is the purpose of Superman getting beat up by this character. That's the point. So the fact that you call yourself a comic book fan, the fact that you call yourself a movie reviewer, to overlook that important point of context in criticism of why Superman is being beat up in the film seems like a huge misunderstanding. Actually, it's a failure on your part as a movie critic to overlook that. But then again, I don't consider you a real movie critic. You're painting a narrative, you're selling a story, that's what you're doing. Let's continue.
And that inherently is the biggest problem with the film, which is the biggest problem with the filmmakers, Superman, including the very honest and humble James Gunn, who said right before our fan screening that he's always wanted to make a Superman movie, despite the fact that he turned one down in 2018 because he couldn't crack the character, and he was only able to do so a couple of years ago because of the dog Crypto, who...
So, wanting to do something and feeling confident in doing it is two different things. There's a lot of things that I want to do that I'm not capable of doing right now. He didn't feel confident then. He felt more confident later. That's why he turned it down. I mean, you're going out of your way to disparage him as much as possible in this video. It's clear as day.
Along with Mr. Terrific, arguably had better hero moments than Superman in his own movie. While James Gunn's Superman has its moments and overall a pretty good cast. And while I really appreciate that they tried to embrace the Silver and Bronze Age DC comics, and I highly encourage them to continue doing so, next time try to find somebody more suited for the assignment than James Gunn. And what specific evidence do I have for James Gunn not being right for the assignment? Look no further than Jor-El and Laura, played by Bradley Cooper and that girl from Westworld. Remember their last message to their son that Lex Luthor and the engineer decrypted, stating that basically they sent Kal-El to conquer Earth, that everyone watching the film thought was faked and they would fix it by the end? Well, they didn't. And that message is, and I quote,
"The people are simple and profoundly confused, weak of mind, spirit, and body. Lord over the planet as the last son of Krypton. Dispatch of anyone unable or unwilling to serve you, Kal-El. Take as many wives as you can so your genes and Kryptonians' might and legacy will live on in this new frontier. Do us proud, our beloved son. Rule without mercy."
Fuck this movie. That's arguably, oh hell, it's not even an argument. That is worse than Clark letting Pa Kent get sucked up into a tornado. James Gunn has his wheelhouse, and I think he should stay in it because I haven't seen him evolve as a director. As a matter of fact, I've seen him devolve.
I mean, they hired him to do the job based on what he's done in the past. That's why Warner Brothers hired him to do the job. So you might not like his take on Superman's biological parents, but that's his decision. And we have to see how that plays out. But there is other criticisms of that I think are valuable. But that's it. That really, out of everything you've talked about here, that's the only thing that I feel like is a true criticism of the core of what the movie is trying to sell. And I don't totally disagree with Nerdrotic on that. I think that there is a conversation to be had about why they chose to do that with his parents. But I'm not going to give him too much credit on that one.
Because the one thing his films are known for is heart and soul, something Superman is devoid of. It was a generic movie with some good and some sloppy directing. It looked like it was hastily edited and re-edited. The occasional callback to the John Williams theme was the only thing that reminded you that this film had a score. That sounded like it was produced on Fruity Loops. And this is why no one will ever stop talking about Dick Donner's Superman, a film that made generations believe a man could fly, something...
Okay, I don't care about this part. We're going to stop there. Okay, so here's the thing. At the very end there, he gave a few criticisms about like the editing and the pacing and stuff like that. Fair enough. He didn't really dive too much into why he had an issue with it. He just kind of threw it out there at the end. It was like a last minute thing. I just think it's very obvious that Nerdrotic here has to appeal to his viewers. And by doing that, he has to nitpick things in a way that comes across disingenuous and try hard. I don't really believe most of the stuff he complained about in this video. I felt like he was really pushing to get that emotion across, especially with some of his like earlier stuff. Only half of this video really talks about the movie. And then he spends a portion of that half spoiling the movie to try and like make it seem like James Gunn is incapable of competently directing a movie, which I don't know why. Clearly he is. Like Guardians of the Galaxy is a triumph of films. Like that trilogy, goated, right? It's a goated trilogy of movies. So clearly he's capable of doing the job. I don't know, is it as obvious to you guys that it is to me that Nerdrotic dialed this one in? This feels like dialed in. It feels really much like paint by numbers. There just wasn't a ton here, so he had to fill it in with a lot of fluff. That's how I feel about it. But anyway, tell me what you guys think in the comments.